Good morning. I'm Anita Hutton, representing the Caregivers Association of British Columbia. We have this 20-minute video made of clips taken from a recent regional caregivers meeting in Penticton. By showing this, we're hoping to give you an idea of the unique purposes of this association. Now, if you or someone you know is involved in any way with the care of an adult family member or friend, you may find this program of particular interest. As you know, there are several disease-specific groups such as stroke, Alzheimer's, arthritis. So why a Caregivers Association? Well, disease-specific associations focus on the needs of the patient. The Caregivers Association focus on the needs of the caregiver. The family caregiver often needs both physical and emotional assistance in order to maintain their own health. The Caregivers Association intends to provide support, education, and information to these family caregivers. I believe this video, this program, in which caregivers speak of their experiences and concerns, will give some understanding of their needs and how the Caregivers Association of British Columbia is working toward meeting some of these needs. Now, we do have groups in Nelson and in some other communities in the West Kootenays, and at the end of this 20-minute video, we will give phone numbers that you can contact for more information.
When the illness strikes in a family, the devastation is so great that sometimes the family itself needs as much care as the person that is ill, and you need to learn how to cope.
I don't know what I would have done without the caregivers.
The caregiver support group really helped lighten the load and helped understand that other people are going through the same stresses.
This provincial group of the BC Association of Caregivers are meeting regionally to try and put together a summary of what their needs are. And they then will go through the process of dealing with the provincial bodies and the regional bodies to try and express those needs and to really give the caregivers support and health care that they need. And I think what the people are doing now is really trying to summarize what some of those needs are, what things are not being met, and what kinds of changes they would like to see happening.
The first question was, what are your greatest frustrations as family caregivers? Our group, one of the frustrations was just the 24-hour responsibility, no end to the demand, and the uncertainty of the future. Just that a caregiver isn't able to plan for the future. They're not sure how long their job is going to go on. A second frustration was related to parent-child caregiving relationships, where sometimes those family dynamics get in the way of doing a good job in the caregiving role. Another frustration related to the fact that you sometimes have respite time and nowhere to go, nowhere to rest, and even though you may need just to sleep, there's really nowhere where you can do that. And the fourth frustration was just the isolation that is involved in providing care, often a loss of friendships and limiting of your activities.
We talked a lot about our frustrations in just communication between caregivers and the person that they're caring for. We talked about accelerating demands and diminishing energy, never having enough time, not getting enough appreciation, no days or times off, lack of having a social life, financial strain, lack of information about services, and affordable respite and night help.
First of all, trying to get the client to realistically see her present capabilities and accept them. And there was a lot of frustration with having no input from the client after being in a healthy relationship for many years. The other concern was long-term care assessor not being involved enough, and when one of the particular caregivers felt they needed contact, it was very difficult to get a hold of them. And so we felt possibly there was too high workload for the long-term care assessors in Penticton.
More respite. They need more respite available out of the home and in the home, overnight or weekends and holidays. Lack of proper diagnosis and lack of physicians taking caregivers' concerns seriously. For example, difficult to get second opinion at times. Staffing in facilities, especially extended cares, are far too short, especially weekends and holidays. Support groups need more solutions to problems, education for uplift.
One of the greatest frustrations, and most of it is nighttime and lack of sleep. And another was not getting a straight answer from the person you're caregiving to. And lack of communication with them. And no agreeable respite from them. They don't want to go anywhere or do anything. And not having any time alone at all.
We felt that 12-hour hospital nursing shift was not conducive to proper care of patients.
You have to be quite close to that mic.
Patients were sent home alone from the hospital when incapable of self-care, when the hospital staff knew that they would be on their own. And there's need for maintaining assistance for people in their own home, looking for an affordable live-in assistant, shared accommodation. And one lady said, as a volunteer caregiver, there's little or no communication between the health system and her regarding the ladies she visits. Lack of coordination of services re schizophrenia problems. Patients must acknowledge need for medication, and this is something that the patients will not do, so it leaves the caregiver in a very bad situation.
Trying to convince the patient that it's time for daycare, respite, etc. Stress, fatigue, coping on your own, dealing with the anger of the patient, coping with someone who won't speak, unable to get out on your own, loneliness, dealing with guilt, not knowing how to go about getting someone into a facility, frustrations when unable to visit a person in a facility anymore.
The second question, what do you do as family caregivers? What do you as family caregivers need to help you in your role? Number one, we need a place to go to rest on respite days. Number two, there was some issues around financial issues, that caregivers that lose working years for caregiving should be recognized by the government for that role in terms of CPP, etc. Caregivers that are not of pensionable age are often without a source of income, and there was a concern that they would be needing a small sort of allowance or something like that, just so that they can have a break and occasionally go on a vacation, that kind of thing. And then the fourth thing that we really need is access to training, assertiveness, and setting personal boundaries. That there's a need for more training for home support workers, expanded peer counseling service, and an ongoing need for caregiver support groups.
We talked about the night shift, more flexible respite care arrangements. Talked about help with the person we're caring for and helping them to adjust to their situation and to come to terms with the fact that the caregiver also has needs. And out of that came some talk about group therapy for the people who are receiving care. Talked about for caregivers help in dealing with their guilt, needing support of friends and other family members throughout, and talked about the need for more education and information for the extended family and community.
The first one was respite, more, including respite beds, more relief with night shift, information to be more readily available as to what is available. increased emotional support for caregivers and clients, and family counseling for changing roles.
Our extended care, short staffing. Transportation to and from the hospital is a problem for people in some communities. More education for new caregivers. What is available? What's out there in the community for them? Understanding from neighbors, nurses, and family. So more public education is needed. Night relief, in and out of the home, some type of respite. Lack of staff in the health unit, especially for continuing care. Question the validity of the assessment, as it's only a few minutes. Lack of specialized care facilities for dementia.
More contact with your families. A lack of help or more convenient transportation. And no transportation on Sundays in Penticton here for hospital visiting. And more handicap transportation is needed, and more family contact.
We need to be heard by professionals and heeded. We need more support for respite time when continual care is necessary. And there's a frustration and a lack of communication between professionals and the caregivers. Medication, cognizance. We need empathy and help with decision making. Need more notice for admission to care facilities. Caregivers support the suggestions for the community and list the community support to assist in your role. The caregiver support group is great support. We need more outreach to people who are not aware of this group. We need a crisis support system for individuals who have problems by individuals on call. We need these for stress situations. This also came up with the mental health problem. Healthcare system is very fragmented. We trust the efficiency will not be affected by the new system. 12-hour shifts for nurses again, and elimination of LPNs, licensed practical nurses, was a big question. And the Caregivers Association of BC can bring attention to people in authority by lobbying for attention in areas needed.
Set up support groups for male caregivers who might be more inclined to come out to an all-male group. Set up a wandering persons registry in cooperation with police, hospitals, and care facilities. Set up a network for exchange of equipment such as used wheelchairs.
What suggestions do you have for community support to assist you in your role? This one, what we thought was that we needed someone to coordinate trained volunteers, and that these volunteers would meet a different need than the current peer counseling service, and that there's a need for someone just to visit isolated caregivers to try to address that frustration of being isolated. And there was some comments about that maybe these volunteers could be organized to provide spaces for other caregivers to go during their respite time for TLC, or just a place to rest.
What suggestions we had, continued caregiver support group, talked about increasing available hours and flexibility in the home support services already there. We talked about having a service which would take people out of their homes so that the caregiver would actually be able to stay at home during the respite time and either sleep or clean out their closets or whatever it is that they want to do there without the person they're caring for actually being there. And we talked about services in facilities themselves, that once the person is in a facility, that there's still a need within the facility themselves for people to still remain connected in the community. So often people, once they're in a facility, then seem to not be connected in the community anymore. People don't come and visit. And having more meaningful activities for people to be involved in facilities as well, giving them chores and so on, so that there's a more meaningful existence there.
Suggestions were, number one was more handy darts, 2, personal care at bedtime, for example, bath and into bed, The next one was getting client into an adult daycare to ensure caregiver, when client is going into an adult daycare, to ensure that the caregiver is ready before discharge, and more effective discharge planning for when people are going home from the hospital to make sure that the caregivers are ready when they get there. More home support workers and hours, and more flexibility with them. More support when a client is admitted to an intermediate care facility, and more continuity of home support workers. One that pretty well everybody felt was educating professionals about what caregivers are facing and doing. Caregivers needing more advocacy.
The fourth question, do you feel that the Caregivers Association of BC, a provincial organization of family caregivers and caregiver organizations, could help you in achieving these needs and concerns? If so, in what ways? The first role that we feel that the caregivers could need is to publicize services available to help caregivers. People often aren't aware of what's available. And secondly, to advocate for communities needing services such as respite, adult daycare, home support, and caregiver support.
We felt the Caregivers Association could be involved as far as getting more information out, specifically from doctors, public health, media, etc. Lobbying groups for government, support groups in all ways, finding out we're not alone in sharing ideas, in providing funding for info sessions and actual help, and educating professionals, and especially put in big print in the newspaper. Many of these caregivers are elderly, and to make sure that they know what is going on.
I've been a home support worker, and I've looked after aged parents, and I think this association probably could help by asking the government to make more money for home support workers. The problem is that the assessment is done by long-term care, and they only assess the physical needs of a person, the bathing needs of a person, and the nutritional needs of a person. What about the emotional, the social, the financial needs of the person? As a home support worker, and with the experience I have with my old people, I had the awareness, without being trained, although I've had a training too, that I know where you can help people. Sometimes you've got to sit down and listen rather than do the housework. But as a home support, we're only supposed to do housework, shopping, maybe, banking with them, but we are very limited by the assessment that's given us. But because I've had old folk, I know that's not the only thing that's needed, so as long as I accomplished all the things that were laid down, I try and get the other things, fit the other things in with it.
My name is Berta Michelle, and I think one of the things that I really forgot to mention is that since I work with Alzheimer's or people with dementia, is that we have caregivers sometimes in the middle in a crisis situation. In other words, they experience chest pain or something and need to go to the hospital. At the present, we have no phone number, we have no agency that will jump in and say, and phone and say, I need to go to the hospital, but I can't leave my husband or I can't leave my wife alone. And I think that should be one of our priorities that we need to really establish in the community, that we need that crisis situation covered, and that could be through the hospital or something.
Well, when I came here today, I said that the Penticton people were well supported in caregiving, and I know that there are needs out there, but when I hear those long lists, it reminds me of how important it is for us to do more to be supportive of people. I'm just going to ask Pat Tichel if she would like to finish off with us today. Before she does, I would like to say thank you very much. I think that everybody here knows that my favorite people in the world are caregivers because of your generosity and your absolute energy for looking after other people and the real sensitivity with which you do that. I ask you to keep on doing it, and I want to remind you with all of the energy that I have to remind you how very valuable you are and how very important the work is that you do. So the most important person for you to care for is yourselves. And I'd like to just invite you to remember to care for yourselves.
This is history in the making, whether you're aware of it or not. I mean, nowhere in Canada has this been done before. We're really breaking ground here. And we could very much be an example to other provinces because, I mean, we're among an aging population where, you know, I mean, everybody's looking at health care. We're just a little ahead of the game because there are a lot of people retiring in BC, so it's just a little bit ahead. I thank you very much for coming. You'll be hearing from us.
I was very glad when I joined the caregivers to realize there was a lot of moral support and help, physical help that I could call on when my wife was at home with me.
You get a lot of support from other people who are also caregivers, and you can kind of let your hair down if things are getting a little much. And they've been very helpful in letting me know what's out in the community in the way of help for myself and my husband.
I'm just so grateful to the group. I've made wonderful friends that will last forever, I'm sure.
Should you wish more information about the Caregivers Association of British Columbia or about groups in the West Kootenays, the Nelson Group, or if you're interested in forming a group in your own community, contact one of the persons and numbers that you see on your screen now. Thank you.